Lewis Hamilton has always been defined by adaptation. From tyre management at Mercedes to wet weather mastery in Brazil, his career is built on extracting performance in adverse conditions. Yet the Ferrari SF-25 presented a challenge unlike any he had faced before. The car demanded a driving style that felt alien, later braking, a sharper rotation point mid-corner, and an unusually narrow operating window that punished even the smallest deviation in steering input. For months, Hamilton tried to bend the car to his rhythm. The result was frustration, radio complaints, and lap deltas that rarely matched Charles Leclerc's raw pace. At Zandvoort and Monza, however, something changed. Brundle described it as a mindset adjustment. But in truth, it was more than psychology. It was technical humility. Hamilton stopped forcing the SF-25 into his style and began meeting the car on its own terms. The stopwatch revealed the effect. While Leclerc still qualified ahead, Hamilton's race pace hovered within 0.2 per lap across long stints, a level of consistency unseen earlier in the season. That delta may sound small, but in a championship context it transforms strategy. A driver losing 0.5 per lap is locked into defensive racing. A driver losing 0.2 can stay in DRS range, pressure rivals and force errors. Acceptance also carries a psychological dividend. Instead of lamenting Ferrari's failure to deliver a race-winning car, Hamilton seemed energised by the fight itself. 6th place at Monza, climbing from 10th on the grid, would not normally be headline material for a 7-time champion. But the manner of the drive, the calm progression through traffic, the absence of desperate lunges, the visible ease in managing tyre DG, suggested a man rediscovering patience. Brundle was right. Hamilton looked happier. And happiness, in Formula One, is rarely just emotional. It is tactical. Because a settled Hamilton is a calculating Hamilton. And that raises the pivotal question. Is Ferrari witnessing the first glimpse of Hamilton as not just a driver, but as a long-term architect of their recovery? For most of 2025, Ferrari's internal battle line was drawn in qualifying. Charles Leclerc's ability to extract peak lap time from the SF-25 gave him the upper hand on Saturdays, while Hamilton often found himself starting deep in the midfield. That imbalance distorted Ferrari's entire points strategy. Leclerc accumulated steady podium finishes, while Hamilton battled inconsistencies and grid penalties. Entering Monza, the numbers were stark. Leclerc sat 46 points clear, effectively carrying Ferrari's Constructors campaign, while Hamilton played reluctant support. But Brundle's observation of a mindset shift changes the political arithmetic. If Hamilton has accepted Leclerc's raw pace, then Ferrari gains something more valuable than parity. Stability. Internal friction, whether through ignored team orders, frustrated radio calls, or off-track body language, drains energy from a campaign. Mercedes experienced this in the Hamilton-Rosberg years, where every strategy call carried double meaning. At Ferrari, Vasseur knows that avoiding such a split is critical. A 46-point gap can be managed. A divided garage cannot. The acceptance dynamic also unlocks tactical flexibility. With Hamilton closer to Leclerc's pace in race conditions, Ferrari can run dual strategies without fear of one car falling into traffic. At Monza, for instance, Hamilton's average stint pace of 1 minute 25.9 seconds kept him within the critical undercut window of midfield rivals, despite starting 10th. That allowed Ferrari to hedge tyre choices rather than committing everything behind Leclerc. The longer this pattern holds, the more Ferrari can think like Red Bull did in their dominant years, using two cars in concert rather than treating one as expendable. Of course, the risk is that acceptance could tip into subservience. Hamilton did not sign with Ferrari to be a number 2, and Vasseur knows that managing the narrative is as important as managing the stopwatch. If Hamilton feels permanently cast in Leclerc's shadow, the political truce could fracture. And here lies the tension. Ferrari need Hamilton's veteran calm, but they also need his competitive fire. The question is how long those forces can coexist before the championship standings themselves test the peace. Ferrari's struggle in 2025 has not been raw speed alone, it has been direction. Early in the season, their upgrade path leaned heavily on Leclerc's feedback. His natural ability to hustle the SF-25 through high-speed changes of direction meant the car evolved around razor-sharp turn-in and peak qualifying performance. But Hamilton, still fighting the alien feel of the chassis, found those updates accentuated his discomfort. The gap widened, frustration built, and Ferrari risked falling into a single driver development loop. Now, with Hamilton's acceptance of the car's quirks, the dynamic shifts. At Monza, his long-run pace showed far less degradation than earlier in the year. An average loss of just 0.08 seconds per lap across the final 15 laps, compared to Leclerc's 0.12. For engineers, that is not just a stat, it is a roadmap. It suggests Hamilton is beginning to uncover balance characteristics that improve tyre life, an area Ferrari has historically struggled with. If that trend continues, his feedback could redirect Ferrari's upgrade philosophy toward consistency rather than one-lap brilliance. This has direct championship consequences. McLaren's strength in 2025 has been exactly that: tyre management over long stints. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri routinely convert track position disadvantages into podiums by stretching their compounds 5 or 6 laps longer than rivals. Mercedes, meanwhile, has leaned on straight-line efficiency to secure damage-limiting results. For Ferrari to fight back, they need a car that can outlast rather than out-qualify. Hamilton's evolving style may be the key to unlocking that balance. There is also a political layer hidden inside the data. If Hamilton demonstrates superior race day management while Leclerc maintains qualifying dominance, Ferrari could find themselves with a split advantage, one driver securing grid position, the other securing Sunday resilience. Used wisely, that combination can destabilize both McLaren and Mercedes by forcing them to cover 2 threats instead of 1. Used poorly, it could collapse into internal rivalry. The next development meetings in Maranello will not just decide upgrade specifications, they will decide whose voice carries more weight in Ferrari's 2026 philosophy. And history reminds us, when Hamilton's voice starts aligning with performance, teams tend to follow. The only question is whether Ferrari is ready to hand him that influence. Martin Brundle's phrasing, a mindset adjustment, may sound casual, but in the Hamilton story, psychology is often the precursor to transformation. Think back to 2009, when McLaren produced a car that was almost a second per lap off the pace in early rounds. Hamilton began the year visibly agitated, sliding through corners, fighting understeer that no setup tweak could cure. But as the season progressed, he stopped railing against the MP424 and started coaxing results. By Hungary, he won. By Singapore, he was on pole. The lesson was clear. Once Hamilton mentally accepts limitations, he shifts focus from what the car cannot do to what it can. The pattern repeated in 2013 at Mercedes. Early in the year, Hamilton admitted he was struggling with braking feel in a car built around Nico Rosberg's preferences. Yet by summer, he had adapted his inputs, leaning on his uncanny ability to carry minimum speed through medium-speed corners. That adjustment laid the groundwork for the hybrid-era dominance that followed. What Brundle noticed at Monza echoes those inflection points. The moment Hamilton stops resenting the machine and begins reprogramming himself around it. For Ferrari, the historical precedent is crucial. Acceptance does not mean surrender, it means recalibration. A Hamilton who looks happier is not a Hamilton who has lowered expectations. It is a Hamilton who has moved beyond frustration and entered problem-solving mode. This is dangerous for rivals because his problem-solving tends to be relentless. Once the noise subsides, the data starts to align. And once the data aligns, results usually follow. It is worth noting the contrast with Leclerc. The Monegasque has always thrived on immediacy. Throw him into qualifying, give him 1 lap, and he delivers. Hamilton thrives on evolution, on wearing a car down until its secrets are revealed. For the first half of 2025, that difference made Ferrari look like a one-driver team. Brundle's read suggests the balance is shifting. The alien driving style may still feel unnatural, but Hamilton's acceptance means he is ready to master it. And if history repeats, that is when Hamilton tends to redefine the narrative, which begs the real question. If Hamilton is entering a reinvention phase, is the rest of the grid prepared for another chapter of his career revival? The immediate scoreboard still paints Ferrari as a team chasing shadows. No wins in 2025, a 46-point deficit between Leclerc and Hamilton, and McLaren firmly holding momentum. Yet strategy in Formula One is never just about the current season. It is about shaping leverage for the next. This is where Hamilton's evolving mindset becomes championship relevant. If Hamilton maintains race pace parity with Leclerc, Ferrari's Constructors' strategy changes overnight. 2 cars consistently finishing inside the top 6 is worth more than sporadic podiums paired with midfield anonymity. Every point matters, especially against Mercedes, who currently operate with remarkable efficiency, rarely spectacular, but almost always inside the top 5. If Ferrari can turn 6th place finishes into 4ths, the math begins to shift. Over a 6-race stretch, that's a swing of nearly 20 points, often the difference between 3rd and 2nd in the standings. But beyond 2025 lies the elephant in the paddock, 2026. The regulation reset will redefine aero, power unit deployment, and chassis philosophy. Teams are already allocating resources, balancing the temptation to chase short-term points against the necessity of long-term dominance. Hamilton's acceptance of the SF-25's quirks may give him greater influence in this transition. His reputation for detailed feedback, sharpened at Mercedes during the hybrid era, could prove decisive in aligning Ferrari's 2026 project. If he demonstrates adaptability now, engineers will view his input as the more reliable compass when tough design trade-offs arrive. Rivals know this. McLaren's aggressive development, spearheaded by Andrea Stella, is designed not just to win races in 2025, but to establish continuity into the regulations switch. Mercedes, with Russell and a resurgent junior program, are playing a long game of efficiency. Ferrari cannot afford to enter 2026 divided. They need both Leclerc's raw speed and Hamilton's veteran problem-solving working in unison. Brundle's observation of a happier Hamilton hints that this unison may finally be possible. And yet, strategy always comes with a risk. When two philosophies collide, qualifying brilliance versus race day resilience, who dictates Ferrari's future? That decision may determine not just 2025 points, but whether Ferrari enters 2026 as contenders or passengers. In Formula One, perception often precedes performance. The way a driver carries himself in the paddock can shape how rivals, the FIA, and even sponsors treat a team. That is why Brundle's observation of Hamilton looking happier carries weight beyond the cockpit. For half a season, Hamilton's body language had been a mirror of Ferrari's inconsistency. Shoulders heavy, interviews clipped, a tone that suggested disappointment. Rivals noticed. McLaren engineers privately described Ferrari as reactive, not proactive, while Mercedes sources hinted that Hamilton's frustration was proof Maranello still lacked operational calm. At Monza, the optics flipped. Hamilton walking into the paddock with relaxed composure, joking with Leclerc, and addressing the media with clarity rather than exasperation sent a subtle message. Ferrari is not broken, it is adjusting. That matters politically. Sponsors are more willing to back a project when its most famous driver projects confidence. The FIA, too, gauges its enforcement priorities partly on perception. Teams under visible stress are scrutinised harder, while teams projecting unity often find procedural grey areas interpreted more leniently. The paddock response was immediate. McLaren's Andrea Stella was asked whether Ferrari's Monza performance suggested a renewed threat. His reply, "They are always dangerous when Hamilton is settled," was telling. It reflected not lap times, but psychology. Similarly, Toto Wolff's comment that Lewis looks more at home now was less a compliment and more a warning. Mercedes knows that a confident Hamilton has historically been the most destabilising presence in Formula One. Even media narratives began to pivot. Headlines that once framed Hamilton's Ferrari chapter as underwhelming shifted tone, speaking of momentum and renewed energy. In a sport where contracts, negotiations, and future driver markets swirl months in advance, this change in perception builds Ferrari political capital. It suggests stability to potential technical partners, leverage in attracting top engineers, and resilience in a constructors' battle defined by razor-thin margins. But perception cuts both ways. If Hamilton's composure is a mask, if frustration bubbles back to the surface at the next setback, Ferrari's regained capital could evaporate just as quickly. Which raises the bigger question: can Ferrari sustain the optics of unity long enough for the results to follow? Hamilton's story at Ferrari cannot be told through psychology alone. The mathematics of the championship are beginning to bend with his mindset shift, even if they do not yet show on the podium. Consider this. Before the summer break, Hamilton's average qualifying deficit to Leclerc stood at 0.42 seconds. Since Zandvoort, that gap has narrowed to just 0.18. Over the course of a 60-lap race, that difference translates into track position worth 6 to 8 seconds, often the difference between being trapped behind a DRS train and being free to attack. Numbers like that change constructors' standings. Ferrari currently trail McLaren by 34 points in the battle for second place, with Mercedes lurking only 18 behind. If Hamilton converts his improved race pace into even one extra finishing position per weekend, say 6th to 5th or 8th to 7th, that equates to a swing of 2 to 3 points per race. Across the remaining 9 rounds, the math compounds into a potential gain of 20 points or more. That alone could decide whether Ferrari finish 2nd or 4th in the Constructors, a difference worth millions in prize money and critical momentum heading into 2026. Yet the mathematics are inseparable from the human dimension. Hamilton's willingness to recalibrate his expectations, celebrating a 6th place at Monza with genuine satisfaction, is not a lowering of standards. It is the mindset of a strategist, of a man who understands that championships are built as much on marginal gains as on headline victories. It echoes his early Mercedes years, where 6th place finishes in 2013 laid the groundwork for dominance in 2014. For Leclerc, these numbers carry a different weight. If Hamilton continues to chip away at the deficit, Leclerc's role as undisputed lead driver is mathematically threatened. Ferrari may not say it aloud, but if Hamilton begins closing races within a second or two of Leclerc, the political balance in Maranello shifts, which means the human question becomes unavoidable. Is Leclerc prepared to share Ferrari's narrative if Hamilton's mathematics demand it? If there is one constant in Formula One history, it is that the great comebacks rarely announce themselves with fireworks. They begin quietly, in the details only insiders notice. Brundle's observation of a happier Hamilton may seem like a passing remark, but in the wider arc of the sport, it could be the first breadcrumb in Ferrari's long-awaited renaissance. Consider Michael Schumacher's arrival at Ferrari in the mid-1990s. His early seasons were defined not by immediate victories, but by the recalibration of expectations. Podiums celebrated, small technical improvements amplified, and a cultural shift that emphasized patience. By the time the titles arrived, the foundation had been laid years earlier in moments that looked ordinary at the time. Hamilton's Monza performance carries a similar texture. 6th place, gained methodically from 10th on the grid, might not look historic. But if it signals the beginning of synergy between driver and team, historians may one day mark it as the true start of his Ferrari chapter. The 2026 regulations add further gravity. Rule resets act as accelerators of destiny. Teams either align perfectly with the new philosophy or disappear into irrelevance. Ferrari cannot afford to misstep, and Hamilton's mindset evolution may give them a compass they have lacked. His career has shown a remarkable ability to anticipate regulation shifts. His feedback in 2013 directly influenced Mercedes' dominance from 2014 onward. If he can play a similar role now, Ferrari's 2026 project may bear his fingerprints as much as any engineer's. Of course, the historical parallel also carries a warning. Great revivals demand unity, and Ferrari's greatest weakness has always been internal fracture. If Hamilton and Leclerc drift into rivalry, the echoes may not be Schumacher's dynasty, but Alonso's frustration, a team with speed undone by politics. Which is why Brundle's remark matters. He was not just noting a smile in the paddock. He was identifying a potential pivot point in Ferrari's trajectory. Whether that pivot leads to redemption or repetition will depend on how Ferrari and Hamilton himself choose to carry this new chapter forward.